Good evening and welcome to Gibson's Bookstore. I am Elizabeth, the events coordinator and your host for this evening, and I am joined tonight by two poets. It is not the two poets that we expected tonight. I am joined by Meg Kearney, and standing in for Maudel Driscoll is Kyle Potvin tonight. Maudel is suffering from an internet outage at her home. This is the first time. We are actually very lucky, knock on wood, that this doesn't happen again, but this is actually the first time we've had an author actually not be able to show up for a virtual event. So thank you for Kyle for scrambling for us.
Yeah, I miss Adele so much. I actually was signed up to watch this, so hopefully.
We're so grateful that you hopped in to save us tonight. We are very hopeful that Maudel will be able to join us tonight, but we are at the mercy of the internet company, and we hope that they get her sorted in time. She might join us later on. We're gonna see. But tonight we do have Meg Kearney here as well, who you have a new book that's coming out very soon. You just announced pre-orders for it, All Morning the Crows. That is your new one. You also have very recently The Ice Storm. That's recently out. And Kyle is the author of a new book of poetry called Loosen. So thank you so much for the two of you. Your books are available from Gibson's Bookstore. We are taking pre-orders on Meg's book as well. Thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Ladies, please take it away.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth. And thank you, Kyle, for being so game.
Oh, thanks, Meg, for having me.
Last minute. I think it was about half an hour ago that Maudel called me in a panic. She lives in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, where they still have lots of snow on the ground, and everybody here in New Hampshire's had a lot of wind today. So I have the feeling that it might be the wind that's affecting her internet up there. But just so people know, this is how we're kind of envisioning things to go. Kyle and I are going to chat for a few minutes, starting with talking about sonnets. And then I'm going to read for about 8 minutes, and then Kyle will read for about 8 minutes. And then we're going to go into the second set. And if Maudel's here by then, great. And if not, Kyle and I have known each other for a long time and became good friends very early on into my move to New Hampshire. I moved here in 2005 from New York City, and Kyle also has spent her time in New York City. So that's another thing we have in common, along with adoption and all kinds of things. So there's no lack
So
of
much to talk about
for us to discuss. Yeah. So in that second set, we'll chat a little bit more, and then we'll each read again for 8 minutes. And at that point, we'll have about 15 minutes left for questions if people have questions or things that they want to talk about. So diving into sonnets, we were just both remarking about Diane Seuss's book called Frank Sonnets, which are kind of, I'll call them American sonnets. I don't know if it was maybe Gerald Stern or Baron Wormser who started that term. You know, we Americans like to break all the rules anyway, you know, so it seems like as long as you have 14 lines, you might be able to call something a sonnet. My mentor, Bill Matthews, would call it sonnet-like if it just met the 14 line kind of structure limit. But I've been interested in form for a long time now, and have been playing with form pretty much since I was a baby poet, you know. But it's just so hard. It's just so hard to sound natural, right, when you're writing,
Yeah.
especially in a strict form like a sonnet. Yeah, has that been your experience?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the same with you. You know, I had my very formal sonnet training. So it's very hard for me sometimes to try something that is unrhymed, for example, or you know, the idea of, and I think even with the American sonnets, you see the 14 lines, but then you do see that turn toward the in the third quatrain area there. So there is that. But yeah, so it's really fascinating for me to see and to read kind of that next wave of sonnets and new ways, creative ways to play with them. But form is so great because I feel like it just forces you to come up with things that you would never have tried without it, because you have to stay within these guidelines. Do you find that?
Yeah, and that's so ironically the freeing part of it too, you know, and why I often mention Molly Peacock, who I met at the Frost Place 1989, many years ago, and she did a talk, not surprisingly, about formal poems, because she is a formalist herself. But it was from Molly that I learned that form could actually provide what she called a safe house, you know, that structure to kind of dive into emotionally difficult material, because you spend so much time thinking about the form, it frees up, you know, that little voice on your shoulder that's saying, you know, you can't say that, you know, you can't use that word.
Yeah, well,
I needed the rhyme, you know.
Exactly. And you feel like you're, disguising it a little bit because, well, it was really blue, but I'm saying it's red, or whatever. But yeah, you can move it to a whole different place and get at those emotions that either you may not have really tapped into or thought about before, or as you said, that you didn't think you were ready to talk about. So, I mean, in the Ice Storm, it's a masterful crown of sonnets, and it's hard enough to write one sonnet, and here you've done a whole crown. Can you talk a little bit about the structure of what a crown is?
Yeah, well, a crown is just 7 sonnets, but the heroic crown is even more insane. It's 15. So 15 interlocking sonnets. So the last line of the first sonnet becomes the first line of the second sonnet. And the last line of the second sonnet becomes the first line of the third. Last line of the third is the first of the fourth, and so on until you get to sonnet 15, which is made of the first lines of sonnets 1 through 14.
And that's what in this, it's just amazing how you put it together. And that last sonnet, which is the compilation of each of those lines, is really stunning. Great job.
Thank you so much. Well, with that, why don't I just read some of those from the Ice Storm? I'm gonna read a few from the beginning, and then a couple from the middle, and then a couple from the end. Kind of mix it up. So the first one, I'm going to take a little sip of iced tea. The first one is called Rain. The marriage is over before the storm strikes. He won't leave without a court decree and a shitload more convincing that she won't change her mind. Silence, not so much their fights, divides the house. She, accustomed to flight, has taken the mountain views upstairs. He is down in the guest room, but could be in the master bed if inclined to insist on his rights. She is, after all, still his wife another 31 days. She's been counting. He fingers his guitar, wonders how love can die so quietly, drain like air from a pinprick in a tire. They're aware such a wound doesn't burst open as if shot by a gun. It starts like a lullaby, innocent as rain. The second one, Lullaby. It starts like a lullaby, innocent as rain, like a song they both hum, avoiding the words. It lies like a baby they dare not disturb, a being they've birthed but hesitate to name. Melody, carol, aria, ditty, refrain, hurricane, gale, tempest, blizzard, all spells with no elixir, all curses overheard. They'd be inept as parents, that is plain. Children, he'd said, tell me if that door is closed. She'd held up forefinger and thumb, pressed them together. Now he's more relieved than she. Explain, she screams, why you won't admit I'd known better. Now there's nothing but dye in the rose. In the forecast, nothing but rain. And then we'll skip ahead to the sixth one. So each has a title. This one is called All That Remains. He thinks we'll always have the weather to blame as night cracks its knuckles, fuses light, then blow. He hadn't seen this coming or didn't want to know. Now home is a war zone, woods that obsessive terrain, strewn with limbs, downed dreams. The ugly refrain, you fool, you fool. The wind taps on the window. He stops her on the stair. Where did my wife go? She slips off her ring. Here's what remains. There'll be 11 days without power, but they don't know that yet. She retreats to bed, that refuge, wonders what the dog senses coming. Thunder, crash of trees, the chasm widening to swallow half the house. Yet she thinks it's just the world imploding again. I'm going to skip one. Number 8, The New World. By morning, the world outside the window is ice. Beyond the front door lies a kind of Oz, tree limbs and power lines entwined like lovers, old oaks and maples encased in glass. They've weathered rougher storms. Each blade of grass a rough-hewn jewel that cuts like the finest diamond when the dog ventures out behind the house to pee. Next time he'll think twice and go in the driveway instead, though he'll follow each of them with their buckets down to the stream, its surface veiled by snow and ice, their only source of water now. They bicker and snap. The dog senses their sorrow. They call a fragile peace around the wood stove. And the next one, 9, Power Outage. They call a fragile peace around the wood stove, like rival armies on opposite sides of a river. As long as silence abides, they contend what's died inside them, trove of once treasured songs that linked and drove each to think it right they spend their lives together. One messed up fantasy collides with another. So much for true love in the face of natural disasters. I can carry my own bucket, she insists, rising from the fire at the words, I won't. You never, and neither can resist money, money, and more than I can stand. Don't say mine, don't touch, don't. The next one, 10, adrenaline. Don't say love, don't touch. Don't bother calling the power company, he says. Everyone's basement is flooding. But she is stubborn and waits in queue, though they won't come any sooner, even when she lies. Can't you understand? My husband is sick. He packs a bag, leaves town for a party. Just once, couldn't he be blunt and say, fuck you? There'd been a story in the paper. A girl lifted the front end of a car to save a dog. A 12th grader, she marvels. She lets out a grunt, hauling up the dead sump pump battery. Thinks, you can handle this house by yourself. I'm going to skip a couple. And I'll read the last two, 14 and 15. How it happens. It sweeps in ruin and it comes by stealth in its silent leather jacket and its blood-stained feet. It sticks to its story of locusts and dust, sings itself to sleep after pissing on the hearth. What does it dream? Spiders and knits, tearing a photo of you into bits. Wine of a dog, flesh soft as earth. Platinum bleeding green, then scorched by fire. That's the color of the sky when it begins. It does what it likes as the rain comes lightly. Then the wind starts to whip and the stakes stretch higher. The marriage is over before the storm strikes. And the last, storm. The marriage is over before the storm strikes. It starts like a lullaby, innocent as rain in the forecast and the sky, nothing but rain. But nothing's what it seems at the edges of twilight. Anger's hand clears the deck, yanks out the lights. He thinks we'll always have the weather to blame. She thinks it's just the world imploding again. By morning, the world outside the window is ice. They call a fragile piece around the wood stove. Don't say mine, don't say help. Don't think you can handle this house by yourself. Further proof he's never known her and won't. The storm takes out the poplars and sweet pine grove. It sweeps in ruin and it comes by stealth. Thanks.
Beautiful, Meg. And you definitely have achieved that idea of a sonnet that's natural. You've got story, you've got image, you've got rhyme and meter, and it just flows amazing in an amazing way.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Whew.
Wow. Well, let me, so I'm going to read a few sonnets. Two, these are not connected at all. So just to broaden that idea. As Meg had talked about earlier, the idea of taking a difficult topic and sometimes using form to be able to contain it, to be able to write about something like that. And so in my book, Loosen, I have a couple sonnets that are about cancer, both my experience and also friends who we've lost because of the disease. So it's helped me to kind of look at it from a third party almost and come at it that way. The hard work of dying.
Mm.
The hospice nurse explained the letting go. Give her space to do the work of dying. On the sill, a green heirloom tomato brought in before the frost sat there, sighing. Or was that me not knowing what to say? Don't ask her things. Such grief in giving up exchanges. Back off engagement. That way we help her go. Tea grows cold in my cup. 10 days since Emma took a sip of tea or ate a slice of grape. She sleeps while rain whispers a soothing chatter. The oak tree clears its throat, weeping acorns in the drain. Yellow snapdragons brighten up the room. A day from now, they'll see a second bloom. And it's also another way to explore the the natural world and kind of look at it from different perspectives. This next one is called Lunar Eclipse. Our neighbors gather in their heavy coats. The youngest ones are thrilled to stay awake. With towels as capes, they race the passing boats, not noticing the chill beside the lake. And then the change begins. The children rush to huddle up. They watch the full blood moon, red across its face, spreading like a blush, as if it caused the darkness coming soon. The loons sense otherworldly things. They wail like mothers warning toddlers near the street. A small girl plays. Her shovel fills the pail. She builds a village at her mother's feet. The earth aligns. She yawns as toes dig deep into the sand. Secure, she falls asleep. Sin. At 8 years old, I dodged the sister's eyes, ate my sandwich, then donned a saintly face. Walked out the gate, past church, and up the rise toward Horn's Variety, that mythic place. The path was new to me. I walked alone and genuflected to inspect a sheared off branch, a mica fleck, a swallow's bone. I used a stick to write, "Damn hell," then cleared away the words. Dust pleated in my skirt. I felt a breath unloosen in my chest, expanding, fearless in this wondrous dirt of disobedience, this fresh unrest. The church bells rang. I rose, denied the call, picked freedom, sin, a red hot fireball. And I'll finish with a last sonnet that, as I said before, usually I'm pretty traditional in terms of meter and rhyme. This is an unrhymed sonnet. God looks down at 3 a.m. Good, you are awake. Your eyes blink like stars. Millions of eyes lit, unlit, open, close. Brooding and bright-eyed in your lonely beds. Dark sky of worry up and down the streets. Concerns at this house, children, money, love. At the house next door, cancer, money, war. War, death, koalas, divorce, war, taxes. Starry, starry night. My flock, please listen. Fret well, gnash your teeth, chew your inner cheek. This world is pain, Do I have to say it? Who created it? Think hard about that. You lie, false corpses, arms, fallen soldiers. I see you are tired. Me too, exhausted. The sky is fire. I will try again. Thank you.
Those poems are so awesome, Kyle.
Oh, thanks, Meg.
Yeah. And you know, it's so funny with we've got nuns and and loons and and adoption and so many overlaps, you know, in our work.
It's so true. Yeah, I know. I forgot I was going to read my floating nun poem. So Meg, tell me and everybody about your new book. And are you like, I know, All Morning the Crows, and it's all bird poems, right? And, how did it come about, and how did, what made you put it all together? I mean, I've read individual of your bird poems before, which are stunning, but how did it all come into this one collection?
Well, they're bird poems, but they're not really about birds.
Yes,
yeah, birds are really my kind of my, what holds it all together and my launching point. But like so many of us, I love a good prompt. And many years ago, I came across this book that's kind of become my Bible, 100 Birds and How They Got Their Names by Diana Wells. And I just decided, all right, I'm going to take each of these short, very short descriptions. So each bird, each of the 100 birds in here just has like a little pencil sketch and maybe 1 or 2 pages, a description of information that you'll find in no bird guide, not just about how they got their names, but all kinds of history and
interesting little tidbits.
Yeah. So I thought, all right, I'll just, start in the beginning and I'll read the description and then I'll just write whatever comes, like start with albatross and go from there. So I did that, I spent a year and I wrote these 100 poems. And then I put it aside and I wrote When You Never Said Goodbye, because I had a contract. I needed to write that book. And I think that's the best thing that's ever happened for me in writing a book is being forced to set it aside for 2-3 years and then come back to it with completely fresh eyes. Some of our mentors say, when you're ready to revise a poem, pretend that you like just picked it off the sidewalk and you don't know who wrote it. That's kind of what it felt like, going back to those drafts. And I threw out more than half of them, and started over with so many. But eventually, like these themes started to emerge, and a lot of my, the themes that we keep coming back to over and over, Stanley Kunitz used to talk about, we all write out of our wound, so that the adoption theme comes in. And of course, relationships, mainly the ones that turned out to be disasters, although the book ends on a happy note in that regard. But yeah, it kind of just started taking on like a life of its own,
So it sounds like you were surprised by some of the poems that came out. Like,
yeah, I was very surprised by a lot of them, and then I had all this stuff, and it really took a friend. It took my friend Tanya Whiten to kind of show me what I had done. She's like, she ordered them for me, and she's like, look. And I'm like, wow, it really does tell a story. There's like a migration.
Yeah, a perfect word. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, fantastic.
So it's been really fun. And then, I couldn't be more thrilled to have it win the Washington Prize. And
yes, congratulations on that.
Beautiful cover. you know.
It is gorgeous. I know. Well, we can't read it. I can't wait to read it. And
Well,
so
your book is fairly new too, you know.
yeah, it came out in January.
Yeah, so it's new for 2 years, really.
Yeah, that's right. I think we get an extra year grace with COVID, right?
Yeah, yeah. So tell me about how that book came together, because I knew your work already before that, but.
Yeah, well, it's definitely been a long process, and it literally it's been about 15 years, slow poet here, pulling it all together. It finally, again, similar to what you were saying, there were certain themes that kept showing up. I'm all about loss and grief, and that seems like it, but hopeful.
Yeah.
And so those are themes that just kept coming up in different ways. And so even when I would, it includes some of my cancer poems, but I always look at all these things as, whatever you're writing about, as you said about the birds, they're metaphors. It's a different way of a language of telling a topic or exploring a topic, whether it's grief or loss or beauty or whatever it might be. And so there are all these different ways of looking at the same thing, which hopefully, help you explore in new ways, and the reader as well.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, just, a lot of the same topics, things that we talked about with, a few poems touching on slightly adoption, and then New York, there's some New York poems in there, and
I saw that.
like that. Yeah. So what about, we're so curious because you're so great at going between genres, and, you've got your beautiful poetry. My go-to book, as you know, because I've ordered so many from you to sign with paw prints, is Trooper, your children's book, which is fantastic. And then you have your books and your novels in verse about adoption, which are fantastic. So how do you go about going between them, and how do they inform each other?
It's so funny. I don't really think of them as different genres, maybe different audiences, from little kids with the Trooper book to teenagers, and preteens. But I mean, they're all poems. Even the Trooper book, it's, as you know, it's about my three-legged black lab. I used to have, my beloved Trooper. And so I wrote it in terza rima, lines of 3. I'm like,
that's it. Yeah.
Form and content, but that was my way in, was a form.
And I think it resonates with the kids too, as you're reading it. Like, it's a subtle, just meter that keeps them captivated and just brings them through. And
yeah, because even though, like, once you break it up across the 32 pages of a picture book, and I broke the form in other ways, you still hear the rhythm and the rhyme, in the book. So really, I mean, the novels, they're made out of poems. So really, I don't feel like I'm switching genres. I'm doing, what I know and love, but just speaking to different people and putting them in different kind of structures.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
You want to read some of the poems and some other things that you have planned?
Sure. Looking at the clock, and I was gonna read a couple from home by now, but I think I might skip that and just read just a few of the poems from the brand new book, All Morning the Crows. Maybe I'll just read like 3. So, well, we were talking about New York City. So I'm going to start with Morning Doves. And it's dated New York 2001, which is dated for obvious reasons for those of us old enough to remember 9/11. It's really hard for me to get my mind around the fact that, I have some students now like coming in and applying to the Solstice MFA program who are like, don't remember 9/11. Like,
so hard to even.
Yeah, how can it be that long ago.
Ah,
Really.
ah.
Yeah. So mourning doves. Morning doves, wake me, one pair resting on my 12th story sill, billing and cooing. Get up, said my mother in a dream. There is much left to weep over. Sleep is for the dead. She should know. Here in the city, the dead are the air we breathe. Bits of paper, they ride the breeze. Musical notes, they fly down the mourning dove's throat, rise again as dirge. Only music can mine such sorrow. My mother never could carry a tune. Now my doves go quiet as a hawk rides the thermals between the ghosts of Tower 1 and Tower 2. So speaking of mothers, this is Starlings. All the starlings I have known are dead. Summers I'd scrape them off the schoolhouse lawn, their nests on the edge of a slate blue roof. Babies featherless, heads too heavy, breathing shallow as promises of drunks. I've known a few of them too, heads dipping and rising before the final plunk. There's only so much you can do, which by the age of 7 or 8 I knew about drunks. But baby birds I thought might be saved with an eyedropper filled with milk, some mushed up worms. What I wanted to shove down their throats was song, echo of their parents' cartoon chirps, their imitation coughs of crows that peppered the schoolhouse willow. Damn, starlings will mimic anything. Drunkards bellow, 18th century allegretto. Mozart once bought a pet starling when it whistled his G major concerto. He was flattered, I am sure, though maybe too like me, he thought a song could save a thing, could save a starling anyhow. I buried those babies on the school's vast grounds, marked the place with stones. Winters I would visit there while my mother drank alone. Quiet, I'd tell the baby's ghost as their murmuration rose, far above the schoolhouse roof, their belly full of stars. And then I'll just read one more. There are some with some humor in them. I'm skipping over all those. I'll end with Duckling Swan. Before I was born, I was biggest of the clutch, already a burden and slow to hatch. When at last I smashed my way into this world, my mother's tongue unfurled a hiss, siblings snickered and jeered. Who could love an ugly girl smothered in egg wax, gray as the curl in a drowned man's lip? Even cleaned up, my down was ash. I was the art of my mother's mistake, the ache in her dinosaur heart. I was the winter, the ice over early, No fish in the pond and the hunters sure shot. I had nowhere to go when they drove me out. I went like something dead in Coyote's mouth, like something a cat mauled then tossed about. I starved through the full moons, slept in the snow. But by spring, a lake was aglow with my gleaming. In spring, I returned and blinded them all. Thanks.
Oh, Meg, I can't wait to read your book. Fabulous.
Thank you. It's Kyle.
Well, I'll finish. I'll read. I'm going to read one poem. It's in 4 sections, and then we'll get to questions. Going under. Each week they hooked me up and dripped a drug into my vein that took me to a world where everything was gone. No light, no sound, nor even recollection of a breath. I didn't mind the drifting off, the loss of faces loved and those I barely knew, or words, the way they failed me like a plunge in icy water stops the heart mid-beat. I sat beside one woman several times, our chairs reclined, IV poles standing guard. We talked of books. She handed me the one she read, its famous author, her good friend. As I accepted this last gift, my tongue softened into clay, a potter molding it. I think, I hope, I said, I'm going un. She looked as if she envied my escape. 2. I walk into a dive and sit alone, another formless body at the bar. The others stare until I start to drink. They soon forget I'm not a regular. I sink into the stool, no history. I could be anyone from anywhere. Hint, do you know my mother's maiden name? I scratch a K into the wood and leave. Outside, I disappear again. The streets are full of people wearing black. I blend in with my monochrome, long jacket, jeans, and leather boots. An average-looking girl. No threat to anyone. Just don't look up. They'd read a novel in my eyes, blue eyes. My parents both have brown, a difference, it seems, that only I have cared about. 3. My doctor recommends a restaurant. Hungry, my family searches for the site. My tongue can taste branzino from the grill, tomatoes, olives, spritzel aperol. The decades pass, 10 years since I was sick, and 30 since I first explored this place. Those years I felt the need to leave my home and disappear into another life. These streets could hide you for millennia. The aqua alta washes clues away. My sons are almost at that age. They're here, but soon they're on their own. Will they return? We lose our bearings in the alleyways. Ahead, a wooden bridge may take us there. Wait here, I say, and cross the bridge myself. I see the way. I wave for them to come. 4. The beach chairs, empty, line the spit of sand. They watch like critics poised to write reviews. My number soon will come. I follow loons, their ballet anguished with their mournful call. One time I knew each step of their routine, but now I'm bored and scatter them away. I wade in noisily. Small rocks don't hurt my feet. I dive, emerge, and start my dance. A practice breaststroke comes to me from pools and lakes, tai klongs and seas. I am surprised it is a welcome thing the way the muscles memorize the past and share it differently. I float onto my back. A kick, a wave of fingers steadies me. The glare's not harsh. A rush of water drowns my face. I gasp. Now's not the time to fall beneath the waves. Thank you.
Yay. I love that book so much.
Thank you.
That's good work.
All right. Anything you want to say? Oh, okay. Lisa's coming back. Time for Q&A.
It is, but it sounded like you had one more thought to discuss with Meg.
I was just going to see if she had anything she wanted to wrap up with.
Well, let's see if there's questions.
If you have questions for our poets tonight, please do drop them into the chat box or the Q&A box. I have a question. So poetry is often used to process situations and emotions. Can either of you talk about how your poetry has helped you through these time periods and these emotional periods and journeys for yourselves?
Meg, do you want to start? Or
Sure. Yeah, I know for some people, they look at poetry as like a way to heal, maybe, or that's often talked about as poetry as a kind of, medicine. For me, though, it's not really that. It's more of a way of kind of taking control of situations that you never had control of at the time, and getting to tell the story, and then of course it's about recreating experience. How Frost used to talk about, no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. Trying to make those words, that's all you've got, right? You're building this thing out of words, and you're trying to make other people feel what you feel, which is the biggest challenge and joy of it for me.
yeah, that's a great way of talking about it, and I think that's where the surprise is so important when you're writing is when you're surprising yourself, of course, as Ross said.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's sometimes I'm writing almost to discover what I think, because it's hard to, it's everything's out there. It's hard to articulate sometimes. And then all of a sudden you just, through writing poetry, it just, something appears on the page. It's just like, well, yeah, actually, that's exactly where I should have gone, or that's where I should end up. So I think creativity is a really fascinating subject, and hard to explain.
Yeah, I love those moments when you realize that the poem knows more than you do.
Absolutely. Thank goodness.
So
yeah.
Let's see. Meg, you mentioned sonnets. You mentioned another type of poetry form when you talked about your poems about your three-legged dog. Do you have a favorite format of poetry?
No, not really. It's all about finding the right form for the poem, and it took me months and months to discover, that, if I try writing this trooper story in Terza Rima, maybe I'll go somewhere, and I have a poem in home by now called Tattoo. That's a pantoum. And I wrote that, it was like a 3-page, long three verse thing, just like that first draft where you just like kind of throw up on the page, and then I challenged myself, like, okay, I'm gonna cut this down to 2 pages, and I'll cut it down to 1, and then I think, well, maybe I'm finally there, maybe, and I send it to a trusted reader friend, and she said, this poem's going to be really great when you finish it. Like, okay. And then I set it aside, and you work on other things, but it's always still kind of, right? You're working on it in the back of your mind. And then I realized, well, I'm trying to write this story. I think I know what I'm writing about, and I'm, that's problem number 1. And I'm enforcing my intention on this poem, right? So I ended up realizing that I'm writing about a tattoo that is a circular tattoo. Oh, and the pantoum is a circular form, you know, and I ended up, I think, using maybe 2 lines out of the 3 pages of stuff, but you know, sometimes that's what it takes, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And and then when I finally found the right form for that poem, then it worked. So you can't play favorites. You got to know how they all work, you know, all those tools in your toolbox, because if you don't know how one of the tools works, then you never know when it might be the right one to help you out when you're stuck.
Those
Right.
are,
You don't know. You have to have that. Yeah.
those are
I was
all,
gonna
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead, Liz.
No, I was going to ask another question, but you have the same thought. So keep going.
I was just going to say that, so Going Under is in blank verse, the longer poem that I just read, which is iambic pentameter, but unrhymed.
Right.
And you see that a lot in Frost and many others. And it just, you know, I didn't intentionally start out to write a long poem. It actually had 2 more sections that I ended up cutting. But sometimes if you just, you know, the form it always should inform the poem in some way. So like you said, with the circular view with the pantoum, you know, you're looking for something that's either obsessive or
Right.
obsession,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Or that circular, and that's that makes it work. I mean, you would never, you know, if you were looking for that obsessive quality or repetitiveness, you know, a sonnet in that case wouldn't have been as good. That's more for, you know, some kind of an argument kind of with yourself about something, or so yeah, that's why I think form is so fascinating, because it can really bring another layer to what you're writing.
That actually kind of answers my question, which was going to be about how all of these poetry styles that you've mentioned are formal poetry styles, and recognized. And have you ever worked in freeform poetry, or, you know, not one of those poetry styles? But it sounds like the form is extremely important for your work. So probably not. You probably don't do free.
Yeah, both of us write a lot of free verse as well, actually.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. So, but you know, sometimes I find that sometimes a form will kick me off in a poem, and I have one that started off as a golden shovel, which is taking a line from another poet's poem and using those as the end words. And I like the poem, but I felt like some of these N words are just wrong. I can't end a line on is, or, you know, I just can't do it. So I edited it, and it's a free verse poem now, which I think is so much better. But sometimes form can get you there, or sometimes it's, you know, but yeah, free verse is a form in itself. I mean, you're playing with tools in the same way, right? Meg, lines and line break, and, you know, just different meters, and you can create your own forms.
Yeah, I think that's what you're really doing with free verse, you know, it's and once you start sculpting that particular poem, you kind of start figuring out, you know, oh, this is a poem with kind of, you know, medium size length lines, and you know, oh, look, or this one's falling into couplets, or, you know, but I mean, we probably write more free verse than formal poems, even though it doesn't sound like it.
I know. We're talking about, fun to talk about form for change, right?
I like how you refer to poetry, the beginning lines of poetry creation, as sculpting. That's actually a very descriptive for me. I don't have the poetry brain. I find it very fascinating that now I can imagine that you have the lump of clay, which is your words, and you need to start playing. That actually helps me wrap my head around this a lot. So that's an excellent descriptor. Any final thoughts for us to leave our audience with tonight before we wrap up?
Well, I'll just put a plug in for Maudell's book. Talismans. It's another, she and I are there. Look at this. You have to get it. It's a Hobblebush Books is the publisher, and who also published Lucen. I'm so grateful to them, and they're sponsoring the series tonight. So check them out.
Excellent. That's an excellent note to end our event on. This is Conversations with Granite State Poets, which we are partnering with Hobblebush Books. Tonight's poets were going to be Maudel Driscoll, whose book Talismans is available from Hobblebush. Tonight, though, we have Meg Kearney, whose upcoming book, All Morning the Crows, is available now for pre-order, coming out in June, I believe, right?
Yeah, but you can get copies now, which, yeah, you'd
All
never
right.
be able to do that in the old days, but you can now.
Well, if you pre-order it, you may just get it. So that is available from Gibson's Bookstore, and Kyle Potvin joining us as well this evening, whose latest book of poetry, Lucen, came out this January. All of these are available from Gibson's Bookstore. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us tonight. Thank you to our poets. Thank you for sharing your verse with us tonight.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you all
to
for
everybody.
coming. Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks, Meg. Great seeing you.
Thanks, Kyle. Thanks for pinch hitting.
Yeah, anytime. Lots of fun.
Have a good night, everybody.
Elizabeth, and thanks to Gibson's
Bye.
Books.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Bye.